Bro, you punch like a girl.
Whoa.
But you working out
Okay.
for something?
First of all, you're
Whoa.
talking
You
you're
punch like
talking to the guy from the country that has Manny Pacquiao as their
you are
prized
not Manny
possession.
Pacquiao, but
And
you're not
you
him.
know, Manny Pacquiao still lives in the same country as me, so I most probably have the same power in a
Okay,
sense,
man.
okay?
Welcome to another episode of StratXchange. Hi, I'm Seth. This is where we talk to people in the industry, entrepreneurs, people who have found success in their areas of business, and today we have a top-tier athlete, Marlon Stockinger. He's a good friend of mine, aka Golden Boy, aka Swiss Cheese, aka the worst Call of Duty player I have ever met. The man has had 178 race starts, GP3 2012 Monaco winner, Lotus F1 development driver from 2012 to 2015, raced in F2 in 2016, Blancpain GT3 championship in 2017, and the accolades just go on and on. In my eyes, he's one of the best race car drivers to come out of the Philippines and the Southeast Asian region. On top of all that, he's a radical motorsport racing director, F1 presenter, Toyota Gazoo racing ambassador, and most importantly, best friend to Seth. The accolades go on and on with this man. Without further ado, let's get to it. How are you doing today, Marlon?
Yes, Seth. Well, I just want to take a minute to, have a nice applaud to your introduction there. It seems you rehearsed that really well. And you even know a lot more about my career than I do. So I'm doing good. It's good to see you, Seth. I'm happy we're doing this podcast. And it's just awesome. Thank you for having me.
Hey, man. You know what? Let's put everything in perspective. I met you during COVID, right? So we became COVID friends, of course, with my background in streaming and esports. We became friends, and what blossomed was one of the most toxic friendships I've ever had in my life. So perhaps you can just go a little bit more in depth about that.
Yeah, it was really, obviously with everything happening, COVID was a bit more restricted. People had more time at home. And then one way I wanted to spend was, during my extra time to really look into esports and getting it a bit into gaming. And it was quite funny, getting into that whole Call of Duty world and how small it gets, and even like getting to play with players from across Southeast Asia and eventually bumping into you. So that was a lot of fun, and I'm glad, that we met that special day, however long ago it was. After our BR wins and me carrying your ass most of the time, we're here now.
No, that's false. That is false.
We're here now. So it's really amazing to be able to do this podcast with you. I think as hard as times have been recently, it's nice that we're trying to find new opportunities and ways to communicate and be on a platform. So I'm really happy that we're both on the other side of things. Instead of just streaming the video games, we're here doing a really cool podcast.
Yeah, honestly, it would be nice if we could see each other in person, but we can make the most out of this. We can make the most out of this.
Everyone has to know we've still never met in person. This is the closest I've gotten to Seth's face. This is the most airtime I'm getting with him right now. So I feel very privileged, I feel very lucky.
Damn right, you better feel privileged like so. All right, man. I've got a long list of questions right now. So we're going to go through all of them. We're going to segue. I know we will segue quite a bit. But my first question for you, we've known each other for quite a bit and we don't really talk about your career. Today's my chance. I want to know, how in the world did you get started in racing? Were you just tossed into a cart and going on from there? How do you find yourself in Lotus's F1 garage? Yeah. So just walk us through that.
That's kind of a crazy story, right? To think about it, where my career started and how far it went and where we ended up. Honestly, the first time I ever experienced racing was, I think, at the tender age of basically 8 years old. I was into quite a few sports, but my father was heavily into go-karting at the time.
So he just tossed you in one of them.
And he basically, was coming back and forth from the racetrack. I had no clue, I hadn't watched F1 yet. And I was always wondering why he smelled like gasoline coming back to the house, why there were these cool helmets and all this cool gear, I was basically trying on the helmets and the racing gloves and, getting curious as you do when you're a kid, right? So I guess he saw that curiosity and decided to invite me to go watch one of his races. And then from that period,
So your dad was like a racer too?
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much kind of runs in the family.
Oh.
My great-grandfather, Otto Frank, I think was the name. I have to check with my parents if that's really correct. But he won like a prestige race in a really old Mercedes. There's a really cool picture of him with his mechanic driving around in a black and white photo through like a forest in a Mercedes prestige race, which he won. So I found that out later in my career, but it was always in our family blood, to go racing and have this, adrenaline rush of going fast.
Yeah, okay.
And my father always watched, Formula One races. He told me he'd be on the fences and watching them back in his time. And he basically started it as a hobby in his 40s. And from there, invited me to go watch him do his races. And my dad actually won races, did really well.
It really runs in the family. It's interesting.
Yeah. And from there, the race weekend ended, all the races were finished. And then he found a way to basically get a go-kart ready for me. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, there's a go-kart there. You want to try it out?" And then, of course you say yes,
Yeah, right?
So they gave me a helmet. I was just in like shorts and a t-shirt.
Okay.
I think I was even in like those kiddie sandals or something. I didn't even have proper racing shoes. And I didn't even drive the full course. This was in Carmona. So I drove up and down like half a lap. They just told me to make a U-turn and come back. And when I came back, I just locked eyes with my father. And I just told him like, he already knew from that look like, oh no, here we go. This is the beginning.
It's interesting you say that because like, it's very clear racing runs in your family, like all the way up to your great-grandfather. Yeah. And so yeah, it's very obvious it's in your blood. No wonder you're so bad at COD. Like you already have a good knack for something else.
Well, dude, if I had more time, there's no doubt I'd be the better player. I mean, just based on my ranking alone, you can't talk to your superiors.
I'm tired of
like
hearing
that
you
yourself.
speak about rank.
Okay.
All right, going on from that,
All
right? How do you find yourself in Lotus F1? I mean, that is insane. That is just something else. For a Southeast Asian particularly, making it to F1 Lotus F1 garage, that's just crazy. So tell me how you ended up there.
Yeah, it was there's a couple of processes that led me to going there, and one of the, like, to specifically talk about Lotus, I remember being at the Formula One paddock in Budapest in Hungary, and at the time Eric Boulier basically became team principal for Lotus F1. And basically through my manager at the time, we got the introduction to go meet Eric Boulier, and who also went on to becoming team principal for McLaren for a very short stint. But he invited me basically to the racetrack in Lotus. And the conversation went basically like, "Marlon, you're from the Philippines. Right. We don't know too much when it comes to motorsport from there with the heritage and the racing, right. But why should I sign you up as my driver?" So imagine, like, as a pretty much 17, 18-year-old kid, you get asked this question of why you deserve to be a Formula One driver. And I told him, basically, I know that from the parts where I'm from, there's not much racing history. Correct. Although we do have a great selection of racing drivers that have come from the Philippines. Right. But F1, I know I can make it my proving ground, and if you give me a chance, I won't let you down. And then he basically nodded. He said, okay. I didn't hear from him for a little bit, but then I eventually won the Monaco Grand Prix in GP3. And the owners of Lotus, along with Eric, basically signed me up the same day when I won that race to be part of the junior program.
So
it was
Monaco
a list
2012 was the catalyst.
That was the catalyst, because I mean, you win a race like that, that pretty much changes your career. And you do a result in Monaco, I had the fastest lap. Qualifying for the main race, unfortunately, I was purple sector in the first and the second, and then it got red flagged, so had to start 7th in the main race. Got the reverse grid pole for the second, and then lights the flag victory with the fastest lap as well in the race, which really showed the true pace for Monaco for us. really was the catalyst. And
Right.
I got the signing and the call up to be part of the program that same day. So it was really awesome, thinking coming from the Philippines, Carmona, you're racing in the tropics. Suddenly you're on the Principality of Monaco racing around the streets there, and you win it and you hear your national anthem. It was really one of the most proud moments of my life and my career as well.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
All the way from Philippines, winning in Monaco.
Yeah.
You know what, Loki, even though it happened in the past, I'm quite proud of you, man. I'm proud of you.
Hey. Means
Alright.
a lot. I don't get those too often from you, so
But-
I'll take it. I'll take
What
it.
can I say? You're not the nicest person in the world. All right.
Oh, come on.
I want to know, of course, how do you mentally stay resilient to do that every time?
I think it's something you definitely learn in your growing years as a racing driver. And luckily I started very early, as a kid. And it was just all those repetitions of trying to go as fast as possible in practice, races, qualifying, muscle memory, the repetition, the grind of every race weekend, building it up, as a kid, as a foundation all the way throughout my career, where, it just felt comfortable. And it's weird to say, like racing, obviously you're going at incredibly fast speeds with, using machines and equipment that have a lot of power, a lot of downforce. And it just got to this point where, it was just my happy place. Like, there's no other feeling like being in a racing car. And for whatever reason, I feel the most safe and confident because, I've been doing it all my life pretty much. And it just becomes second nature. And you just start to see racing lines where maybe like to a normal person, they don't see that. And it just becomes so natural. And there's no other thrill like it, really. The best way I can explain it is like, you're basically Superman flying really close to the ground when you're in a racing car, and you have that feeling of flying. So you feel free. All the worries, all the troubles you have in your everyday life or whatever you're thinking about in that day, that just disappears when you're at the track, and you just get this sort of tunnel-focused vision, and it's just the best feeling, right? I mean, it's such a privileged position to be a racing driver, to have experienced that as well.
I want to know, who are your role
Of course.
models personally? It doesn't have to be an F1, it could even be a boxer.
I mean, honestly, I think my greatest role model was my father, because he really got me into the sport. And then he was never hands-on. There's a lot of parents that are very hands-on when their kids start out racing, but he really found this nice balance of me learning how to, find my own way. Because end of the day, when you're on the track, there's no one else that's gonna hold your hand and help you go quicker. I mean, you have a team around you, but he taught me how to figure things out for myself and be able to apply that at the racetrack. And I think, if it wasn't for him, I would have never been in the sport. And I really thank him for opening my eyes into really dedicating yourself to something that's very purposeful. It's really hard to find, something that matters as much as this. And I really look up to him for giving me that, basically, and finding that through racing. Because if it wasn't for my family, my dad getting me into the sport, I wouldn't have been in the position I am in. Having experienced what I've experienced, winning races like Monaco, traveling all over the world and Europe, and being with the best teams, it was really, all thanks to him. I mean, from a sporting perspective, I always think that I can compete on any level with anyone, but I do look up to people. I mean, COD, that's even easier, honestly, if we're talking about you and I. But in a serious sense, I always like what Senna brought to the table. Even though I never saw him live, when he was racing, a lot of the footage was post his death in Imola when he had the unfortunate accident there. But, watching him just speak in the press conferences, the way he carried himself, the way the documentaries would always, document how he lived his life and his purpose towards racing. It wasn't only a lesson in driving that you'd learn from him, but he always brought lessons in life, and he was very philosophical and a deep thinker and an intellect. So that made it really interesting to learn what he experienced and how he applied that in life and how he lived his life for it, So he was really one of the people, I guess, in racing early on that I looked up to. And you can see definitely a lot of, that trait. You can see it in Hamilton. You can see it in someone like Verstappen, and I think that's why this year it's such a good title battle because you have two intellects of that same killer instinct going for a world championship, and no one's willing to give it up. It's like two heavyweights in a boxing match. It's like who backs down, who's taking the biggest punches, blow for blow. They're gonna go all the way till the end. 12 rounds. This is
Hopefully
to the end
goes
of the season.
down to Abu
it's really
Dhabi,
gonna
man.
be down to the wire. Yeah, I think
I hope it goes on to Abu Dhabi, man. All right. So you just mentioned your father and you traveling all around Europe. Maybe you can tell me more about like your dad, right? Because I don't know. To me, when a kid enters a sport, right, the parent tends to back off. Do you have that sort of dynamic with your father where you got like literal technical coaching advice from him, where he literally mentioned how you're gonna take that corner? Do you get that sort of coaching from him?
No, the only time he always thinks he's better than me in driving and smoother.
Of course.
But the only serious, I'd say, advice he likes to give me is how to park in reverse, because he says, you racing drivers, you don't know how to go backwards in a car. So he's always judging my parking, my parallel parking, and reversing the car because he thinks that racing drivers only know how to go forward, which we do, right? But I'd say my parking skills, I parked the cars here in the background today. I think it's impeccable,
that's you?
but he always thinks he does it better.
That's all you?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's all me, So
his critiques are not valid, you think?
no, he's just learned to really let me try and flourish and find my way. And if he does say something, it's always just a nice positive comment here and there. And I think that's really the best way to approach it, especially when you have family involved. It can get very tense at the racetrack. Emotions are high, so I'm half Swiss, and I think with a little bit of Swiss neutrality, we're always very calm in the paddock, and things are run smoother that way, right? And other cases, I've seen families at the track where it's very chaotic and it's like a complete combustion of emotions, and the driver gets it done at the end of the day. But you just gotta find what works for you. And as a family, that's really how we've always operated. I just do my business there. They trust me. They know I'm the best person to get behind the wheel, and that's a nice feeling. You can just freely think 110%. I can go as fast as I want on the racetrack.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So, back to what we were talking about role models, and you talking about how you got tossed all around Europe and wherever. Were you alone as a kid, just racing in all these junior series?
Yeah, that's actually a funny story. So I remember having to leave when I was 16 from the Philippines to go to Europe to pursue my racing career. And basically, the first place we went was Silverstone in the UK. So from the sunny Philippines, tropical weather, we fly straight to the UK, go to Silverstone to meet my first team boss. His name was David Hale. He ran high-tech GP racing at the time. And it was to go talk to him about competing in the Formula Renault UK Championship, which was the same championship that Hamilton started his Formula career in as well. So we kind of followed that sort of path. The UK was obviously, it's the island for motorsport. You pretty much have all the Formula One teams based there. And in Northampton and in that Silverstone area, it's just a breeding ground for the best racing drivers, mechanics, engineers, or anyone involved in motorsport. The UK is still the place for that, right? So the decision was made that, I meet the team. We agreed to run in the championship that year. And then I had to check into a bed and breakfast. My father came along with me. And I remember thinking we're gonna spend time together until the race. And then one day in a cold, wintry afternoon, he goes okay, Marlon, I'll see you later. I was all right, yeah, when are you gonna be back? A week or something, he was normally going back to Switzerland. And he was no, I'm heading back to Manila. And I was what?
What about
do you mean? What about me? And he says, no, you stay. And I'm what? So it was the first time, that I had to live by myself, right? Far from home, no friends or family that I didn't have at the time yet because I'm so new to the country.
And you were 16.
And I was really young, yeah. So I had to live, eat, sleep racing. I also went to a college in Cambridge as well called CATS, and I was trying to pursue finishing my A levels at the time. But yeah, I had to really pursue racing. Was going to college in Cambridge at the same time, and really like managing these two things as early as 16 as a kid, pretty much still, So it was very tough, but I think I really appreciate that moment now that I'm older, because it really taught me that, basically anywhere in the world, after learning how to travel by myself, flying in an airplane for the first time by myself, learning how to cook eggs for the first time by myself. Like, I didn't know how to cook eggs or rice. I'm Filipino. I didn't know how to make rice or cook eggs. So I was on Skype, phoning my mother, asking her, how do you boil an egg or cook it? I don't know how to do this, right? I had to figure this out.
Okay, when you were learning how to cook an egg, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make a perfect sunny side up, no? How many times do you break the damn yolk trying to make that perfect sunny side up when you?
It breaks normally the minute it scrambles into the pan, and it's already screwed up.
Whatever.
It's already messed up. Exactly, so even to this day, after how many years, and I love making myself some nice eggs in the morning. So it still happens. So I've been making a lot of scrambled eggs recently, but I'd say I only have that
because
skill.
You can't keep the yolk intact.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna make a scrambled egg then.
Yeah. So to this day, that's all the reason why I know how to cook was because I got so sick of going to the grocery, buying the pre-made meals or canned food, to just put in the microwave. After 2 months, I was like, I can't keep doing this. This is all processed food. This is not good for me. I'm trying to be an athlete. So I had to learn how to cook, because I felt like the more I controlled and put good food in my body, I treated my body like a Formula One car, right? You want to give it good fuel, so you have better output, performance, you think clearer. That all really helped, So I started to understand wow, racing, yes, maybe a lot of people stereotype it's just like driving a car. You don't need to be an athlete. But in this day and age, the forces you experience in these racing cars, you have to be fit, So
yeah, of course.
Learning how to feed myself the right food, training properly, getting into the mental state, having the team around you, all of those tricks of the trade and experiences that really that catapulted itself the minute I was, dropped into the UK and had to kind of fend for myself, pretty much.
And how long were you there for, on your own, complete lonesome?
Between all of the places, so I lived in the UK for a couple of years. I lived in Czech Republic, was in Italy a lot, the south of Europe, in Portugal, the Czech Republic. Actually, one of my teams was based there, so I was pretty much living there almost also as well. So pretty much my whole career, because my family, my siblings, they were either going to school, my family doing their work or business. So they couldn't, our base was still here in the Philippines, so they couldn't really split themselves too much. So I had summers with them, I'd spend time with family during the Christmas holidays, of course. But a majority of the time I was on the road, traveling with the team, going by myself to the events, and you just need that commitment. And it was really a big step because, a lot of racing drivers here, I think in the Philippines, they find it tough to kind of break out of the comfort zone of being in their own backyard and learning a new culture where, in some parts of Europe, people don't even speak English to you.
I'm pretty sure it's a human thing, just getting out of the nest.
Yeah, and I was lucky, my obviously I have European roots, so it didn't feel too much of a culture shock for myself. But that was still a hard process to get over and learn and be comfortable with. I'd say in the beginning when I was younger, I hated it. Of course, I wanted to go home. I was almost even crying, thinking why the hell am I so far from home? I don't have friends. My whole life is just based around going fast. But every other year when I got more experience, I started to really love being in Europe more and more. Then I started missing home less, even though really my home's here in the Philippines. But I appreciated being able to see the world, to get perspective, to experience all these things, meet people. It was you're very privileged if you're a racing driver, and we all know that because there's only 20 Formula One drivers on the grid every year. So, and if you think about it, on that same calendar weekend in Formula 2 and Formula 3 and all their other racing events, that's less than maybe 100 drivers, 100 at most.
You think about the number of people in the whole world, and only 100 of them make it to that garage. So you spoke about mental state, and I want to know, of course, we know all about flow state, right? You just get into that rhythm, that groove. Do you have any mantras on race day? I'll tell you, for me, before I play a football match, I need the game, Triple H, left boot on before right boot, and I'll drench myself in cold water before I step onto the pitch. What's your routine, pre-game routine?
That's that's really surprising you say those things. And I'm most probably going to say a couple of things that you're going to be surprised that are very similar to what you do. One is definitely there's a bit of a superstition.
Yeah,
but that's just part of the whole mentality of getting you into a state of I'm about to compete, So for instance, every time I get into the car, I can only get in from the left side of the car. If I get in from the right, it just feels wrong, But the left, it's okay, I'm in the flow and, I get in, this is the right side for me to get into the cars from the left. And then everything's gonna be perfect today. And what I always do is, I always put on my fireproof underwear, the socks, the suit. There's a whole process I always repeat every time. And it's just really creating habits that consistently want you to get results on the racetrack. And the habits start already off the track, from your preparation to your training, to the way you eat, the way you sleep, your procedures when you're at the track. If you get this habit of this is what I know already I'm gonna do, all the groundhog stuff of preparing, registering for the race, the traveling, it becomes pretty much automatic. So all you need to think about is driving fast. So I had that whole process, even getting ready for a race one time in Monza. I had one of my best races there. It was steaming hot. And we unfortunately got a technical issue, so I had to start further back from the grid. And I fought my way all the way from the back to I think fifth, had to start last.
One hell of a drive.
My dad told me, all right, you're gonna come here. You got cold water from the freezer, and then before the race poured it all over me. And then it just set me into this cold water shocked me into a focus, right? Because it shocks your body. And then I felt calm and I was just ready to go, and I was just in the zone, and I had a really good race from there. So there's all these little tricks, there's all these superstitions. I'm not saying mine's the same as any others.
You just want to try to get consistency. I thought for me something that because I competed in esports, so when I have my keyboard 1 millimeter off, or I'm not planted in my seat correctly, it just throws my entire form off. Do you feel that same sort of situations where just something slightly off, it completely throws off your entire performance? Are you just so adaptable?
I think in the beginning when I was younger, I used to think that everything had to be perfect. But life doesn't really work that way sometimes. There's always going to be a variable or an obstacle that challenges you. Some days you get it perfect, but those days really come fewer and far between. And I learned that as I got older, So even if situations would change, or if I didn't have everything perfectly going for how I felt, I learned to just be more adaptable, and you kind of just have to smile and enjoy your way through, right? Because competition, racing at that level, there's a lot of pressure, but end of the day, you're not a heart surgeon, you're not saving anyone's life. It's sport, it's entertainment, and I think what I really tried to focus on, as I got deeper into my career, as I got closer to Formula One, was really also trying to enjoy the sport and why I started this in the first place.
Right.
And I think when you come from that mental state and you're able to, be fluid, or the famous Bruce Lee said, be like water, you can just adapt to any surrounding and just flow through any situation. Because racing, I'm sure in sports as well, it's a flowing environment, right? There's things happen, things ebb and flow. So you have to be within yourself and your mentality and how you think about a race weekend. You have to be able to be adaptable to that as well.
Okay. Right. Dude, you're amazing, man. All right, so I want to move on from F1, right? Not really move on from F1, but just to kind of close it out. So of course, it's very clear you're racing actively in F1. You were doing GPs here and series there, and I feel, from friend to friend, I feel like you've kind of slowed down. What happened there, man? Fall from grace?
No, I don't think it's a fall.
What was it?
It's definitely not a fall from grace. End of the day, if you think about how far we got, to actually being in development programs several times in my career with BMW when they were in F1, starting in the Philippines, not having a blueprint, not knowing how far we were even ever gonna go or how we were gonna start this whole thing, with my family and the decisions I had to make in my lifetime to reach that level. We literally had this opportunity to be in a Formula One grid. It was actually a race in Belgium, and there was one driver that had to pull out. And at the time, I was actually doing very well in my championship, and there was a consideration for me to go there. So at the time, the sponsor was asked a certain budget, which in Formula One numbers, it's always crazy. But unfortunately, I couldn't get the seat because one, the sponsor already dedicated like a certain amount to my career where I was racing in F2, and they couldn't get any more budget that they had already set aside for that to put me into my first F1 GP race in Belgium and Spa. Now, Andre Lotterer in the end took that seat, but we were as close as that, And in a nutshell, and I can go a lot deeper into this, there's certain things that need to work out budget-wise. Aside from you even just being a racing driver, there's a lot of factors. You have to be in the right place, the right time to really become a full-time driver in an F1 seat. But we had, we got the opportunities, we tried to make the most out of them, even though ultimately I didn't end up there. I mean, there's no reason why I could also have a career that's still very lasting in motorsport. So I don't think things have slowed down in a sense. I think what we achieved is still something to celebrate, and hopefully can set a standard for the next generation coming in, not just from the Philippines, but the region of Southeast Asia, because I really believe that we have the right talent, and I've seen drivers here locally in the Philippines. I've seen drivers within our region do well and succeed. We just need the right steps, and maybe, with what I've learned and experienced for myself, hopefully we can see someone else take those steps and actually guarantee themselves to a seat in F1.
Of course, man. I mean, regardless of what has happened now and then or whatever here and whatnot, you have had a pretty freaking illustrious career, and I'm pretty sure there's more to come. So, to move on from that,